Hi. 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 Hi, everyone. Can I have your attention? Hi. Hi. Great. Well, welcome to the Francis Kite Club and the offices of All Books. We're a little publishing company located behind that screen there. There's a kind of arched doorway, and behind that a sort of cave out of which we run the publishing company. And my name's Colin Robinson. I'm the publisher at Or, and we're a feisty little independent publishing company. We do about 30 books a year, and we've been going since 2009. Our sales have been booming recently, probably not least because we specialize in books which tend to be critical of people who are in Washington, and at the moment being critical of people in Washington is quite a good place to be if you want to sell books. So, but we're here tonight to celebrate the publication of this book, Autobiography of a Skyscraper by Francis Greenburger, and which he worked on with Rebecca Paley. And it's a book I'm very, very proud to be publishing. I've known Francis for quite a few years now. We met up at Ledig House, the writers' retreat that he helps to run in upstate New York. It's a wonderful place, and I was up there to talk to the writers, and Francis was there, and we got to chatting. And subsequently, I managed to persuade him to come onto the All Books board, and after that, I've seen him periodically, and I'm really grateful for the kind of sage advice that he's given me about running the publishing company. It's always very to the point and calm and collected, and really has been his support for all has been really invaluable. I want to just thank a few other people who've been involved in this book. So Rebecca Paley's here, a co-author. And I want to thank Lee Skolnick, who's an old friend of Francis's, an architect, and actually, as he was demonstrating earlier, a pretty good piano player too, who's going to be in conversation with him. And I wanted to thank Elisa Salazar, who helped us put this event together, and Max Battle, who's been helping us on the publicity for the book, and Ray Abernath, who's also been helping us with the marketing of the book, a couple of people from All Books, Olivia Heffernan, our publicity director, who runs these events, and Bella, who's at the front there, who has been checking people as they come in. It's always very much a collaborative effort. So yeah, thanks to all of those people. But I'm really, really excited about publishing this book. It's not the sort of book that we publish very often. You know, I've always thought that running a little independent publishing company was a complicated business. You know, there's a lot of different functions that you have to bring together: publicity, production, marketing, editorial, sales. You have to get them all in the right order for the book to work. But reading this book made me realize actually that independent publishing is actually pretty straightforward compared with building a skyscraper, where the amounts of money are considerably greater, the number of people who are involved are considerably greater, the scheduling has to be so precise for it to work, and so many things can go wrong. And actually, some of the things that can go wrong are detailed in this book. It's an incredibly complicated process and a fascinating one, and it involves many, many thousands of people, as I'm sure that Francis and Lee are going to talk about. But I think the thing I really took away from it was that if you can get a group of people who are all good at what they do, and you can give them some leadership which is intelligent, you know, listens to what people have to say about what they need and tries to give it to them, then you can achieve remarkable things. I mean, really astonishing things. And it's a pity that people running this country at the moment don't seem to understand that. But Francis does. And the story that he's written for this book is an exhilarating one. And I'm very, very proud to be publishing it. So here's Francis and Lee. Thanks.
There we go. You ready?
I'm almost ready, but I just want to give one more shout out. Colin did a great job of acknowledging most of the people who are in the book, but we have one more important person here, Donna Cohen, who really did a great job with all of the photographs and illustrations. So thank you, Donna.
So you want to talk?
Let's go. Let's do it.
We were on the phone 2 days ago, and we said, well, what are we going to do? What we always do, sit around and talk about buildings and architecture. But I have some really hard-driving questions that are going to stump you. For instance,
So I don't know whether we got to advertise you, but Lee, in addition to being a friend, is an extraordinary architect and has spent a good part of his professional life designing museums and various exhibition venues, children museums, all over the world, as well as also artists, environments, studios, and houses. So he's very steeped, and so we share our art interest and architecture interest and a lot of things. So thank you for agreeing
and tennis,
and tennis.
and Anguilla.
And I love, he played piano tonight, but he's an incredible guitarist and singer. And, you know, when it gets late at night and kick back and Lee starts playing, I just love that.
Well, I told my wife, Joanne, that when we had our phone call a couple of days ago, you encouraged me to play, and when I got home, I told her that, and she said, "You don't want to do that."
Yeah, well, I think sometimes our partners often say such things.
And we agree because it's in our best interest.
Correct.
So here's the first question. Why did you write this book? What motivated you?
So, as you know, Lee, this is the second tower that I've built. And when I built the first one, of course, I was a virgin. I didn't know anything. And didn't know exactly what I was getting into, but somehow I did get into it. And that's a building in downtown on West Street, 64-story building. And what I experienced was all of the people that come together. You know, sometimes buildings say, oh, that was built by related companies, or that was built by this or that. They didn't build it. You know, hundreds of workmen built it. And many, many people put themselves on the line. For instance, I'm staring at my banker, that handsome guy over there, and he put himself on the line, and the community puts themselves on the line, because these buildings have to be approved by the officials, and often people in the community come together, community meetings. Not to mention all the design professionals and engineers. So it's a whole world, and I thought that that should be wider known and more properly acknowledged. And I also thought that some of the participants, any one of the various people I just mentioned, are not always aware of the community, and that letting them have a way to know how that it takes a village, as a certain person once said, was worth acknowledging. And you know, Rebecca and I not only worked together on my first book, but we ended up becoming close friends. And I threw this idea and a title at her, and she thought it was a good one. And I said, well, let's do it. And she said, great. So here we are.
Here we are. So I read the book, and I felt like you wrote it for me. Because
I did, Lee. Don't tell Isabel.
every part of it was of interest to me because of, I guess, what I do. But I've never seen it all in one place, all these different perspectives. But then I started to wonder, so who did you write this for? Who is the reader that you imagined, or did you, while you were writing the book?
Well, one of the readers, and it's an incredible compliment to know that you found it of interest, was the professional community, because I was thinking more of younger architects, but they go to school and they study design, and yeah, they know about constructability, and eventually they do construction inspections, but they don't really know the whole process. And so I thought it would be good for them. So you could say the same thing about engineers. You could say the same thing about all of the participants. And so I think I really wrote it for all of them. And then, I also thought that this might appeal to general readers, the same kind of, I'm not, there was that famous book about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, which was sort of in my mind as a reference point. But certainly the professional community, but we wrote it not as a professional book, but as something that could be read by anybody who took an interest in what it takes to build one of these things.
One of the things I found, which really kept me reading, I mean, I was up at night and I didn't want to go to bed because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. And who came up with this structure, this idea that you, oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm here to do it for you.
Thanks. That you could tell a story. You could tell a story through the organization of different perspectives. How did you decide that rather than simply descriptive prose?
I don't know, that was just a concept that I sort of had from the beginning, that the best way to tell the story of these people is let them tell it themselves in their own words. And, there are some literary references for that. I remember Studs Terkel's book on working, where he interviewed a lot of people who were working and about what it meant to them. So we're not the first to do it, but it's it's a literary technique and creates an informed narrative because you're hearing it from the horse's mouth.
Well, I mean, it succeeds in, I use the word propulsive. It moves you forward. It has a sense of rhythm, has a sense of dynamics that I think that's one of the things that makes it very readable.
Well, one of the reasons that I've loved collaborating with Rebecca is, she has such a good perception of narrative and the story. Being in the thick of things, I don't necessarily see how the progression takes place, but she's great at ordering it, and and she also has, because her lens is sort of literary rather than professional, because maybe I could have collaborated with an architect or something, or who knows. But
we could do that sometime.
she brings she creates a filter that makes the story accessible and organizes it in a readable way.
Well, I mean, there's very little fat in it. Everything was, and this is something I wanted to ask about. Everything was important. So, it wasn't like, the financial story is what it's all about and the rest is just filler, or it wasn't just about design, or it wasn't just about, I mean, you had a lot of technical information in there, you know, engineering, the whole elevator story saga. Did you start out by making a list of all the various pieces?
No, you know, part of the idea of the book and the reality of it was written in real time. So part of what happened is that Rebecca would often, I would go out to Chicago to walk the building and see where we were, or go out to meet with the architects or the interior designers, et cetera, and Rebecca would come along. And, you know, she in real time, you know, be walking around the construction site, and she'd go over to some iron worker or sheet worker and say, "Can I interview you?" And he's standing there, you know, about to fall off the side of the building. And he says, "Well, yes, okay." So,
So you knew that you were going to do this from the beginning of the project?
yeah, no, that was the plan from day one.
Wow. Interesting. You know, one of the things that I noticed, and it's not a criticism, but it's an observation, it seemed like,
You can criticize me, I don't mind.
all right, so here's the story. There were, everyone was characterized as being good. I mean, did you have this incredible good fortune to have everyone involved in, whether it was the financing, the construction, the engineering, the design, the sales? I know, it's,
Oh,
it
I
seemed
mean,
amazing.
You know, there were, I mean, it worked out in the end, but there were, ask Rod, my banker, whether everybody was good. I mean, he had a few colleagues that were very hard for him to manage, and he just, you know, I'd call him up, say how it's going, and he'd be like a prize fighter in the middle of a fight, and he'd say, "Well, you know, I'm working on it. I'll let you know." Always projecting optimism, but there were a lot of battles that took place, and even if they're not overly expressed,
Well, you did a good job of burying
they're implied, and you know there were a lot of difficulties.
Was this project more difficult than others or easier?
Was this more difficult than others? You know, I don't know. Maybe somebody has charmed projects that go from beginning to end, but you know, I was just thinking we built one in West Palm, in Palm Beach County, which we built through COVID, because Florida pretended that COVID wasn't going on. So the guys kept working. Of course, they ended up keeping getting sick. But anyway, but that one, we spent 2 years working on the entitlement. Palm Beach County is a very difficult place to get anything entitled. And we had a concept. It was a large 10-acre piece of land, and we had a concept for 3 mid-rise buildings, about 17 stories, so that there would, what that does is it leaves a lot of land around it that could be, you know, grass and lawns and open air and space. And we showed it to the mayor, and we showed it to all of the council people, and they loved it, and do this, do that. They said, you know, we went through this approval process, and that we had to have meetings with community meetings. You know about those. I'm sure you've attended your share of those. And, you know, we threw away more food because the politicians keep telling you, well, you got to have another meeting. Have another meeting, and you have another meeting. 3 people show up. You've got 100 roast beef sandwiches there, so what do you do with them afterwards? And we were all through, and we were at the final moment, the penultimate moment, the last community meeting. We thought it was perfunctory that we would get the final approval. All of a sudden, 100 people show up. They hate the design. it's going to ruin their community, it's going to ruin their lives. And this is after the politicians for 2 years have been saying it's great and everybody loves it. Where these people came from, I don't know, but they came, and the politicians said, you've got to do something about this. And we ended up ripping up the plans, back to the drawing board, and we started again on a completely different plan, which was not mid-rise, it was low-rise. Same number of apartments, but the community wanted it, they didn't want the open land. Who knew? So that was a very frustrating moment, as you can imagine. So all these projects have, or at least the ones that I've been through, have a lot of difficult moments. And, you know, I was telling somebody, I left the director of development who works with me, who's a terrific, amazing guy, stoic. I saw him today. He was a little frazzled. Not exactly sure why, but I think some things are finally getting to him. It's a tough business.
But you've been doing it for a while, so
Been doing it for a while.
you feel like, can you be flustered anymore, or do you, anything that comes at you, you've seen it before and you've dealt with it?
You know, my job is like Rod's job. You know, you just got to keep smiling and tough it out. You can't be freaked out. If you get freaked out, then everybody's freaked out. I have to calm people down, not get them more excited. So that's.
So let me ask you something that it's not about this project per se, but I mean, I had to write this down too, so I got all of it. You were involved with, obviously, with time equities, which is more than enough to keep a dozen people busy. But you've also got the literary agency, Art Oh My, the sculpture park, the residence program, summer camp, the education programs, the exhibits, and of course the pavilions that they're about to open soon. Could you ever think of stopping or pulling back? Or are you just voracious for anything that comes on your radar screen that you've got to?
You know, I'm of a certain age. I feel great. Isabel and I traveled to, we went to Zimbabwe for a wedding and New Year's party. New Year's. Last week we were in Brazil, met 50 people in 8 days. I think I'm doing okay. And this morning I had a meeting with a super nice lady. Woman's name is Janet Mills, and she's the governor of Maine. But she doesn't like the politics of the existing senator. She's exactly my age, which is lucky number, 77. And she's running for Senate. She says, and she's full of energy, doing really well. Not everybody loses their minds when they get a little older, as some leaders do.
I have to say that I went through the book, and as I said, I was really quite engrossed, except when I got to the some of the what I considered arcane financial stories. I mean, I had never heard of a mezzanine loan, for instance. I thought that was a loan to build a mezzanine, but apparently not. So, how did you try and dumb it down so someone like me might be able to understand it? Or, I mean, I'm sure there are people here who work with Francis for whom this is, a young adult reader. But for me, it was, what is that again? Why is that important?
So when I was building 50 West Street, the building downtown, my financial partner, not the banks, but my equity partner, was a hedge fund called Elliott Management Company. Elliott's one of the top 3 or 4 hedge funds in the United States. And they are very, very smart and very, very tough people. So having lived with Elliott through 50 West, and 50 West was this very successful project, and they did extremely well, and they were very happy. But, you know, when you deal with these guys, if you take step 1 inch to the right, they got 47 clauses in their agreements that you violated half the world. And
This is investors or lenders?
this is a hedge fund, investors.
Oh, a hedge fund.
So when I got to 1000M, and they're incredibly expensive. And as some people know, I'm very economical.
I can vouch for that. We've worked together.
Sorry?
I can vouch for that. We've worked together.
Okay, good. So, right, that's fair enough, fair comment. And so the idea of having a guerrilla partner who was exacting very, very high price for their investment was something I couldn't fathom. So, and also, you know, the economics of development is pretty thin. You know, people think, oh, real estate, make a lot of money. Well, you know, that's not true. You can make almost as much money buying a CD. You know, a successful development project makes between 6 and 7%. That's hardly Christmas. So I decided that I would come up with a unique structure that gave a tax benefit to certain types of investors. And in return for that, they would be willing to take a lower, they would charge less for their money. And there was a lot of interest among these tax-oriented investors to find a place to invest their money so that they didn't incur high taxes on whatever properties they had sold. So it was just a moment in time when, you know, I was desperate to find a cost-effective solution and put these pieces together in a very unusual way, but that's my job.
Well, you intimate, I guess, in the book that there were some times when you couldn't sleep at night. I mean, is that typical of this kind of project, that it has not only, I'm sure, more than modest potential, but it could really ruin you?
You know, I've lots of answers to all that. One, when I lecture to college business students about entrepreneurship, I always tell them, I say, look, if you can't tolerate risk, if you feel like you're going to not be able to sleep at night, don't ruin your life. Go get a good job and let somebody else worry about it. So, taking that advice myself, on a good day, I try to do the best I can, and then I go to sleep. But occasionally I do have a stressed night, as Isabel will attest. So, you know, you can't help being in that position when you take large risks, but I try to keep it under control.
Well, other people in the book who were quoted definitely gave the impression that you were the calm one, that things would hit the fan and you stayed steady.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, I think that's part of my job, you know, to stay the course and manage the problems. I mean, I often say that if you're going to work in an emergency room and somebody comes in bleeding or shot or whatever, you know, you can't faint. I mean, that's why you're running an emergency room. You got to deal with the problems. So sometimes the real estate business is oftentimes running an emergency room. I mean, if you're an architect, you're living it too.
For me, it's 3 to 4 a.m. That's
And you
sometimes
know,
I only make it to 3 a.m. and
you have to deal with the clients.
yeah,
That's really tough.
yeah, I know.
You know, I just get to yell at you.
I can absorb that too. So, when I was, again, reading the book, aside from the really moving things that people had to say, I had this sense that this project, despite challenges, was, I wrote that it was a fortunate project, that stars aligned in order to make this the success that it was. Not detract you from it, what you did to make it happen, but that things fell into place. Is that true?
Well, you know, I think it was a combination. I think we worked really hard to align them. They got out of alignment often, and then we squished them back. And we were also lucky. But you know, you know, one thing that comes to mind at a certain when Rod first called me to offer me a loan for this building, it's typical in large projects that not a single bank will give you the money. You got to put together a group of banks. And for instance, in those days, getting more than 75 million from one bank was very difficult. So this involved a $300 million loan. Normally, you'd need 4 banks. Anyway, Rod calls me up and he says that they want to do the loan. And I said, well, you know, how many banks are you going to pull together? And he said, no, we're going to do the whole thing. And that's just the way Goldman does it. So I said, well, really? This is after I've been dealing with all these banks. So we'll put in 50, we'll put in 20, we'll put in 75, scraping it together. He said, sounds good to me. Well, halfway along the line, for whatever reason, Goldman changed their minds, and they decided to put in 2/3, and they wanted us to go find somebody else to put another third in, which, you know, was difficult. And now this was now sort of recovering from COVID. Chicago wasn't the most popular place in the world among bankers. In fact, it was one of the less popular places. And so I'm trying to think about, well, you know, I'll call this bank, this friend, lean on them, lean on this one, try to convince them. And I said to Rod, well, does Goldman have a syndication department? He says, no. And Goldman says, well, Rod says, well, maybe I'll call Anthony. Anthony? He says, you remember Anthony? I didn't. And I said, oh, Anthony Valvo. He used to be at Citibank with me 30 years ago when you were a client. I said, oh, yeah. And he then went to, I think, went to another bank, and I think I did at least 1 or 2 deals with him there. Anyway, he calls Anthony up, and Anthony is now the head of lending at Deutsche Bank. and the head of their private bank. And Rod says, oh, you know, you remember Francis, blah, blah, blah. I need $100 million. And Anthony says, no problem. And I said, no problem, okay. And I didn't believe it. And then not too long after that, he wanted to go and see the building in Chicago, the site. So we made a trip out there, and, you know, he was sitting around. Now, normally, you know, in a bank, 100 million, probably need 30 signatures, let alone. But at Deutsche Bank, according to Anthony, he only needed one signature, and that was his. So that's pretty bold. And so we're sitting around, and he says to me, he says, so he tells me that, you know, that he's the one who's going to approve this loan. And he says, you know how many construction loans Deutsche Bank is going to do this year? I said, no, how many? He says, one. And so that was certainly fortune and good luck. I can't take credit for it. Rod gets the credit. So we did have fortune, but we also kept pushing and pulling and making tough decisions and navigating, you know, COVID, excuse me.
Yeah. I'm going to switch gears. Like you said, I'm an architect, so I have strong opinions about buildings. And I often tell people that New York is a place where the greatest architects in the world come to do their worst work. And the reason I say that is it's so complicated. The zoning, the occupancy, very often the developers, you just can't get a great building out the door. You, on the other hand, go to Chicago, which is probably most people's estimation, the greatest city for architecture in America. Incredible buildings. Not too far from your site, a little bit north, I guess. Did you feel the pressure that I would have felt putting such a big building on the skyline of that city?
So we're getting a high sign, but okay.
Oh, sure.
You know, I mean, I knew that this was, you know, there aren't, just like Fifth Avenue here, there aren't that many empty sites on Fifth Avenue, like none. And the same thing with Michigan Avenue, which is the Fifth Avenue of Chicago. So, you know, I knew that this was an exceptional site, and whatever we did on it would make a big impression. I probably didn't feel the pressure quite as much as the architects did. And certainly Helmut Jahn, this was, you know, he felt the most important building that he will have done after building half the world, because Chicago was his adopted hometown. He lived in Chicago for 30 or 40 years. Of course, he understood the town just the way you said, as one of the most important architectural cities in the world. So he felt the pressure. And I think the other people who we had invited to participate in the competition did too. And so they all put a great deal of effort into it. You know, it was a long journey with Helmut and the design. And I think because he kept making new schemes, and I kept encouraging him to. And you'll read the book and you'll know the story that at a certain point, after we had all agreed on a particular design, including all the city planners and everybody, I changed my mind and we went back to drawing board. But Helmut had a great attitude. He had this line, "We can always improve." And that's really what informed his entire practice. And he didn't only say it in this context, but he said it he said it all the years that I worked with him. And that was his way of sort of pushing the envelope. And even though he did get pretty upset when I told him that the plan that we had all worked on that had been approved and Chicago Tribune architectural critic had said was a wonderful design, that we weren't going to do it.
This is the condo plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a few, this was on New Year's Day, he had a few choice words for me. But he got over it, and then he was always muttering, we can always improve. So, there you go.
So I know we're running short on time. Should we expect more skyscrapers? Is this an addiction now?
You know, my director of development told me today that he's going to finish the project that we're just beginning now, which is 900 apartments, a two-phase project. And then after that, he's had it. That project, of course, that'll take 10 years or something. So this is not a short-term plan. You know, I'm not rushing to build another tower. I'm happy with but frankly, I didn't think I'd build another tower after 50 West Street. So I don't know what's going to happen.
So in other words, yes.
No, not yes. Just take it as it comes.
So here's just a thought to sort of go have dinner. Have you found, and this is, I have found that if you get certain critical things right in the very beginning, there's this natural snowballing of positive results that all the rest of it, which is the bulk of it, the extra 90% after that first conceptual breakthrough, if it's the right thing, if it's the right idea, then everything falls into place in a certain way. You know what I'm talking about, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to some degree is an architect's vision. But I do know what you're talking about because I think Helmut felt similarly. Of course, before we went into the second version, or maybe it was when by the time at one point or another, Helmut had an enormous office, conference room. You know, it was as long as this room and wider. And I went there for, at one point, every wall was lined with different schemes of this building. There must have been 50 different schemes that he had laid out. There were probably 20 or 30 models on the table. So it was a journey until he found that right moment. But certainly once that moment was found, then things seemed to flow. So I think it's a fair.
So maybe I'll ask you one more. Would you have done anything differently if you had to do it over?
You know, I live the no regret path. I don't look back. I don't have regrets. I just keep going. So I don't really respond to would I have done it differently. I just I met the challenges. We overcame them. We got it done. We're going to pay Rod back. And I'm happy.
Well, thank you both for the book. It's really wonderful.
right, drink up and be merry.
So Francis will be sitting in the back of the bar signing books. There are some that are already pre-signed that you can grab on your way out. If you had any questions or you missed asking them, you can feel free to keep it short, but you can ask Francis in the back of the bar there. Thanks for coming.